welcome to Portal Stormer. In this video I'm going to share some fun stories from when we were growing up, because it wasn't all trauma. We as kids, especially in the 70s and the 80s, pretty much had free reign, especially if mum and other people in the household were drunk. So we would often be out in the streets, and it's not like we were causing trouble. We were just out on our bikes, going to the park to play, and every now and again just coming home, racing in to get some food and then racing back out again. But a lot of the parties mum had, the relatives would turn up, and they were all big drinkers as well. And the interesting thing is that it'd get to a certain time at night where they'd all decide they would start singing. And they'd put on certain songs, like Mum really liked Shirley Bassey, so songs like Big Spender, and all these other, old songs like From a Jack to a King, and they'd all be competing with each other. It's really fun to, for us anyway, to be watching in the background, whether it was from the family room or whatever, seeing the adults all trying to best each other with their voices. And my mum actually used to sing in a nightclub for a short while before she met my stepfather, who was an Irish guy, in the 70s. But the parties that I remember from the 80s was mum up there trying to sing or belt out whatever song. It was really interesting because she would compete with one of my other aunties, who was a very soft, gentle woman. She married a man and became a Jehovah's Witness. He was a bastard. And anyway, she was always projecting this, I'm so pure and innocent. But she would maybe have a sip of beer. She was always, oh no, I don't drink or whatever. But when it came time for the singing, and my mum would be behind the scenes saying to me or whoever would listen, oh, you watch, Auntie Val's going to start singing Tammy. And fair enough, it would get to a point in the night where you'd sing, and my mum would mimic her. It was quite mean to mimic your own sister, but of course when you're drunk, mean doesn't mean shit. But I hear the daffodils. Mum would do this routine behind her back, but then in front of her, the more drunk she got. But my auntie would be singing the song like she was auditioning, and it was all very, very, very heartfelt, and it was sweet but also cringy at the same time. And I remember another time we were out coming back from some party, and for some reason we were parked. I don't know, it felt like it was a back street, but maybe we were waiting for a train crossing. But all the adults in the cars started to sing Please Release Me, and just the refrain, and how everybody would be, one up and singing in the next key and everything. And us kids were trying not to laugh, and then we got into trouble for laughing because it was just so ridiculous. It was so obvious they were all competing with each other. And if it wasn't the singing, it was the dancing. And of course everybody thinks they're the best dancer, the best this or that whenever they're drunk. So there are a lot of shenanigans that we were privy to, and the lucky thing about having other adults around, they're kind of like a buffer. But I remember one of the adults was a woman who was a white woman, but she was a bottle blonde, and she was a narcissist too. Everything was all about her, and everything was mysterious, and only she could unlock the mysteries, and she was that kind of person. But I remember once, I was a teenager, and Robin was, while Mum was getting ready, she was trying to educate me about black magic and white magic. And I was thinking she was going to talk about witchcraft, but she was talking about how some men love black women and some men love white women. And she was saying that your mum's like the queen of the black women and I'm the queen of the white woman. And I could tell, I'm a teenager, but my bullshit meter was already quite healthy. And I was sort of listening to her. Now, that is definitely true. Some people have their own, likes and dislikes when it comes to the opposite sex. But the fact that she was projecting that image onto her, that she was white magic and my mum was black magic, and it was that there was a connotation there. It was implied, but it wasn't said, that for me, because I was halfway between, I wasn't really special. She didn't say it in those words, but she was saying, we're just lucky because we have those extremes, and of course you're not as dark as your mother, so you've got a little bit of it. But it was just this typical narcissist way of projecting and trying to make you feel bad so they could feel better. She was the same woman who, when her and her husband turned up to take Mum out with them, there was some event that was planned. Mum was so drunk that she couldn't even stand, and she kept telling me and yelling at me, help me, get her ready. We've paid for these tickets, we have to take her. So she was an enabler as well. And since I've been really passionate, and compassionate and open my heart about Mum, I've been a little bit more easy on her, but I still remember some of the things I ended up going through because of that. But there were so many instances where other people dealt with her, and I watched that. For example, when we had a pool party, Mum went through I don't know how many costume changes, and she kept coming out, and she wore wigs at the time in the 70s. It was either she was wearing a wig or a turban, and every time she came out all glamorous, and of course she had to make the entrance, she'd be walking down the stairs and everyone had to be looking at her. And one of the men picked her up and threw her into the pool. And it was obvious as the day or the afternoon went on, she was getting more and more drunk, and every time they threw her in the pool, she went back inside and put on a whole new outfit, wig or hat or whatever, and do her makeup again. And by the 7th time, I think it was, she was really cracking the shits about it. But us kids kind of felt some secondary righteousness, because even though, thinking about it now, it's not really a nice thing to keep throwing someone in the pool, her manner and the way she conducted herself and picked on everybody and created a scene and ended up doing something childish and ending up smashing into something, breaking something, or ruining the night, whatever. It was kind of like a little bit of vindication to see other people doing, not that we would have wanted to throw her in the pool, but that ego coming out every time, getting dressed up and expecting everyone to look at her and the way she operated. Everyone had to be on standby for her, so it was good to see people pushing back. There were times where, when she was getting too drunk, we had an open fireplace, and especially if it was winter and the fire was going, when she started falling asleep, we'd keep inching her chair closer and closer so the heat would keep her quiet, asleep, whatever. And during those moments, we'd be rushing around, tipping things down the sink and throwing bottles in neighbours' trash cans. But we had a lot of fun times when she was sober, but it was when she was drunk where either stuff was going on at home or we would be just out in the streets doing stuff. We had a lot of free reign. There were times where we would go to other people's houses and end up roaming the streets, walking through schoolyards, all kinds of things. That's how it was back then. I know that there are some kids today who get that freedom too, but I'm not saying it was great, because, my brothers later on touched the law a little bit with getting into trouble and doing stuff, but for the most part we were just exploring and glad to be out of the house and being at other people's houses and seeing how they lived their lives and realizing, they don't have to cringe or run to their bedrooms because someone's having a tirade and smashing things or fighting with other people, what have you. But there was this free and easy thing about Mum and her boyfriend at the time, who ended up, they married 25 years later. we would be out in the car and they'd pick up hitchhikers. I mean, I remember there was a guy, and all he could do, he sat in the back of the van with us kids. So it's an interesting how it was, he's a good dude. But he just kept singing over and over, Jeremiah was a bullfrog. And us kids thought it was hilarious. But he was one of those types where when they went back home with him and let him stay the night, they woke up in the morning, TV was missing, blah, blah, and so forth. So that's the problem when you like to party and just trust people you don't know. But we, my brothers and I would often just hide out in our bedrooms when parties were too. But sometimes Mum would be really good about it. Before the party started, she'd come up, she'd bring us bottles of soda and chips and chocolate and all sorts of things, almost like a bribe, stay in your room. There were times where I did come out and saw some choice things. I'm not going to sully her memory by going into detail, but some things that a kid shouldn't see. But there were some things that definitely I learnt my lesson through watching behaviour. That was one thing being a highly sensitive kid. I was always in the background watching, studying, analysing, collecting data, because even though I understood that this was bad behaviour, I was sort of cueing myself at how to react later on when around people like that. But it's funny how over the years and then decades it sort of morphed into just block everybody just in case. But anyway, I just wanted to share this, and I'm going to share some more fun stories as they come up. I feel like this is an important thing to do rather than just wallowing in all the negative stories, and there's a lot to wallow in, but at the end of the day you sort of ask yourself, what am I hoping for if I already feel like I've healed to a certain degree? I do think that I should be sharing the stories going forward for other people out there who might have gone through it, especially if you had a parent who was alcoholic and a narcissist. You might not have had that combination, you might have had other things, but I do want to remember the good times. I want to remember the times she did spoil us, and spoiling us isn't necessarily a wonderful good time. It's a good time where at least we felt at least like she loved us. And I know she did in her own way. But there were times where there was feast or famine in our household. There were some times when we had no food. And we had to go over to the neighbours. And that's actually another funny story. This lady who did help us when we needed food, when Mum had just disappeared for a few days and then we had nothing in the house. I mean, literally nothing apart from a few dry pasta sheets. And this lady would help us. Her name was Lois, and she lived diagonally across the road, and she was an absolute nut job. For example, Mum got her drunk one night, and I had to help her. I was a teenager. I had to help Mum take her back home, and when we were getting her ready for bed, she kept laughing and pointing at the ceiling and said there was a huge penis coming out of the ceiling at her, and Mum and I were just laughing and teasing her, but she was absolutely insane, this woman. When the workmen, the city people would turn up to fix the drains or whatever, she had to come out. She'd be all dressed up, but she was sort of like an apple. She was a short woman, but she had like this apple body with two, chopsticks for legs. But she would come out when the workmen were in the street, and she'd be wearing her short shorts, and she had no business wearing short shorts, and these high heels with the blocky heels, like really ugly looking old lady shoes. And she would have on this halter neck top, and the tray of drinks would be clinking as she walked out. Hey guys! And you could see all the men look over their shoulder. Oh, they obviously knew her. And we were in the front yard at the time. I remember seeing it, and she was flirting with him and everything, and it was just so embarrassing. Again, another thing that I watched and thought, okay, mental note to self, don't do that when you grow up. But this same lady would call the cops at all hours, all the time, saying she had a prowler hanging around. And then, of course, when the cops would turn up, she would invite them in for a drink. She was a piece of work. She also ended up turning a blind eye to her husband, doing things to their daughter in their own bed. And the daughter told me years and years later that Lois would just roll over and face the wall, pretend it wasn't happening. And she wasn't a drinker at all, Lois, but she was, oh God, she was a nut job. And always that type of person who would, if you had a sore eye, she'd come up and point, oh, you got a sore eye. She was just that dumb and vacuous or whatever, but she was a trip. But there's a lot of other people in our lives, and I think it's important for us to remember, look at the whole picture when you're looking back into your past, especially if you're trying to deal with past trauma, because what I'm finding, and it's something that's really an important lesson, that it helps temper the negativity. It takes the spiky edge off the negative stuff, and that's in no way condoning or excusing the bad behaviour that happened to us as kids. But I don't want my past to be a black corridor and then now be saying, well, look at this. I mean, I know that there's been some brilliant things I've achieved, a lot of things, done a lot of things that other people couldn't do. And I had just learned that when I was talking to my therapist today. She was saying, you're always so dismissive of yourself. But why don't you focus on the things you've achieved all through your life? For example, when I was a kid, I fought off several attempts for SA, several different males doing things to me, or trying to do things to me, and I think that's a saving grace. That's something that was instilled in me, but I always had a very strong sense of justice and righteousness. The earliest one I can remember was when my father took me to a friend of his. We had a barbecue or something, and this guy kept calling me his little girlfriend, and he wanted to make me his girlfriend. And my dad, we left early, and at the time I thought, this man is so nice to me, why? But I learned later, of course, that's why. So I was protected like that, and Mum had always instilled in me, don't ever trust a man when he says this or that. Just know that you're too young and blah blah blah. So when the next time something happened to me, I was probably, I would say probably 9ish, and I was I'd gone with my mum and her Irish stepfather, and my Irish stepfather too. He used to play soccer, and there was this greasy looking rat like guy waiting near the entrance where the soccer grounds were, and I had gone off to play on my own. I really shouldn't, but I was just so used to it. And I was climbing up on an embankment, taking my clogs off, which were really pretty. I loved these clogs. They were white with big pink and red roses on them. I took them off, put them down, jumped down, and I climbed up and then jumped down. I don't know what I was thinking, but you know what kids are like. And then all of a sudden, when I jumped down, I turned around and saw this man holding my clogs, and he had a white shirt and black slacks, but he looked like he'd slept in those clothes or worn those clothes for a few days. He had sort of greasy black hair, and he just had this look on his face. You could tell there was something wrong with this guy. And I'll never forget, he had Marlboro cigarettes sitting in his pocket, but he said to me, do you want to come and watch the football with me? Because there was football grounds around where football matches were happening. I said, no, I've got to get back to my family. And I said, can I have my clogs? And he said, oh, get up and jump down once more. So something told me just to do it, so I did. I climbed up and quickly jumped down, and then I reached for my clogs, and he gave them to me, and he said, come on, I can buy you some meat pies and Chiquitos, which is a chocolate bar in Australia. Come with me and I'll get you a Coca-Cola, you can come and watch the football with me. And I knew the urgency coming from him. Lucky he didn't grab me, although I probably would have bit him, I don't know. But straight away I said, I'm going to go and get my stepdad. And then I ran off barefoot holding my clogs. Luckily, it didn't take long for me to get to the clubhouse. When I got there and told them just about the whole soccer field, families, men, women, including my mum and my stepfather, went running looking for him. They took a long time coming back, so I don't know if they found him. They never said it, that they did. But I remember thinking to myself afterwards how close that was. I could have been taken away and God knows what. Another time when I was 12, I was staying at my auntie's house, who was actually a friend of Mum's, so she wasn't really an auntie. I had a lot of aunties growing up, but her name was Irene, and she had been in the mental hospital that Mum had been admitted to at the same time, Larundel, years before, so they were friends. And I used to love staying at her place because she lived in St Kilda in Melbourne, right near the beach, and her little daughter Jackie, was like a cousin to me, so I'd go and stay. And this time when I was 12, and mind you, I was allowed to smoke. When I hit 12, my mum caught me smoking, and I tried to lie and say it was salami. She could smell. I said, I'd smoked meat. But funnily enough, she bought me my first carton of cigarettes and let me smoke. Okay. But I was at my auntie's place for a weekend, and she had a boyfriend, and I'll never forget, he was sort of like the kind of man I don't like, sort of like a Barry Gibb type, and he had big gold chains and his hairy chest, and thought he was the bee's knees to all women sort of thing. And he'd come over and he was paying a lot of attention to me, and I knew that, and I was deliberately staying away and playing with my cousin. And then the next day we went to the beach, and I was wearing a one piece, and he was trying to tell me how mature I was for my age and how grown up, and that I was really intelligent, which is a grooming way of talking. And even though I didn't know the term grooming back then, I knew what was going on somehow. I knew that what was coming out of his mouth was lies, probably because Mum had prepped me. When men talk to you like that, especially when you're younger, don't trust it. And I did notice my Auntie Irene watching and stepping in, and because she was trying to figure out too what was happening. Well, the next morning, it was early, but the sun was coming through the curtains, but it was still sort of really early. Everyone was asleep. I was in the lower bunk bed, and my cousin was in the one up top. And I just woke up because I felt something down my pants. And when I looked over, I saw it was this guy, completely naked, sitting on the bed, having a toss, and had his hand down my pants. And straight away I pulled his hand out and said, "Get out." And he kept saying, just let me. And I said, "Get out or I'll call Auntie Irene." Now, he stood up, but he was still tossing. And I screamed out for my Auntie Irene, and she came in and she went ballistic. She punched him, smacked him, scratched him, and threw him out of the house completely naked, threw the keys at him and told him to fuck off and go home. So he was banging on the door for a while, "Just give me my clothes," and she wouldn't. So he had to drive home naked. Anyway, she said to me afterwards, please don't tell your mum, she'll kill me. And I didn't tell Mum. I don't think I ever told her. But I think it was a good thing because it sort of vindicated, it made me feel like, okay, now I'm right, this is wrong, that behaviour was wrong, I was correct in telling my auntie, and when she dealt with him, that was justice. Now, God knows what he went on to do to other people, but I felt vindicated in that moment. And there were other moments, like one time, oh God, I would have been a bit younger than that, probably around 10ish. I was at a family barbecue, and there was this uncle that we didn't know, who was sort of like this big, bald, white guy who was used to throwing himself around. He sort of looked like he could have been a cop or something, but he was a bad cop type guy. But my cousin, another cousin, my real cousin, I forget which one it was, I think it was Norma. Anyway, we were in one of the rooms just watching TV and just being kids, and we were sitting on the bed. It was a double bed, and he came in, and all of a sudden he just allowed himself to flop onto us, and his arms he deliberately laid across our necks and pinned us down, laughing as he was pinning us down. Drunk or not, it was reprehensible behaviour. And luckily my cousin and I, being feisty, we wouldn't take it. We were struggling, and then he kicked his shoes off, and I grabbed one of them and hit him on the head with it. My cousin started kicking him, and he ended up getting beaten up by the other uncles and aunties. So there was different things like that that made me understand that it was righteous to fight back, that it was righteous to not allow men to play certain games. Now, women do shit too. We're not as, we're not innocent at all, because we're all human. And that's another point I'm going to make in another video. I'm getting a bit sick and tired of being told because we're women, we're supposed to be weak. Of course, that's said to us by men who can't step up and be the real strong men they need to be, so it's easier for them to just tell us we're weak. And those types of men are on the internet, on YouTube, telling people how to be, and the women are sitting there. But I get it. I understand the paradigm and the bullshit that goes on with that. But I'm really glad that I came up through the ranks during a time where that sort of shit was not tolerated. We understood that you were human first and foremost, and that you don't get to project and control other people just because of your sex, your gender, or your status, whatever. But that's us altruistic Gen X people. But I'm glad for so much that happened in my life. I remember good times like coming or going to the beach and staying there all day. We would leave like 5 a.m. to find a good position, and we'd be there all day, and then coming home, your skin is, you've been in the sun, the salt is sort of making your skin feel tight, your hair is all encrusted with salt water, but you're eating fish and chips, and that night breeze coming through the window as we drove home, listening to the radio. For us, we could, songs like Skyhooks, horror movie, and the Hard Rock Cafe, songs like that would come on the radio. I remember those times, and they were good times. Even though they might have ended that night in drinking, there were a lot of times where we could just hide out in a room, and that's something that I did a lot too. And the other thing too, when Mum was drunk, you could turn her around in a certain way. She'd always flip back, but when she, if you started being silly with her, there was a child in her that you could, if you could stir that up, could be quite fun and help her forget the negative or the projecting or the temper or the rage. So knowing what she went through, and if you're interested, watch the video about forgiveness where I talk about her life. But now, where I am at now, looking back, knowing everything that she'd gone through, doesn't excuse, but I understand. But the good times were really good, and the bad times were really bad. Again, and I keep saying it, lucky that I was never SA'd, even though there were several attempts throughout the years, and was never beaten up. But I'm going to share some more funny stories. I didn't script it or anything or write it. I just wanted to riff. I was going to do another video, but decided I might do it later, talking about how I created hell, or a different version of hell for my Storming Archives. I want to talk about all the realms and how they relate to mental health issues, why I wrote them and what they explain, and so on. But here I just wanted to share that sometimes it is important to remember the good stuff. And when it comes to my understanding of my achievements and the things that I should remind myself, that's a strength, that's a talent, that's a skill, includes being able to protect myself. I was able to at a young age. That's a good thing. And keeping my sense of humour. I mean, I've barely scratched the surface in terms of what I've shared. If you're interested, but there's a lot of fun stories, and I just feel going through this darkness in these last few months is necessary, but opening doors for me in terms of healing, but also sharing with others and hearing other people's stories, and just knowing we're all in it together, and we can heal and we can sing kumbaya, but we can also remember that we're warriors and that we need to bring those swords out when necessary. Otherwise, let's not always stand like sentries and be on guard, hypervigilant all the time. Anyway, I'm going to get going and I'll talk to you soon. And if you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you did, because there's so much more to share. And I really want this channel to end up being something that's like a two-way street where people are sharing their stuff. I'd love to do numerology readings for people for free. I haven't had any bites yet. I could do a short numerology profile like I'm doing for some of the famous and not so famous people I'm interested in. But anyway, take care and I hope to see you soon.